Coming up on Theater Talk.
Yeah, it is weird to write something like that about this kind of play. You know what I mean? Because I would assume the guy that wrote this would punch somebody in the face.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
Guess what? I'm an idiot! And so are you. Who else but a couple of real f***ing idiots would f*** up their lives so bad that they had to go to meetings all the time and pray and be honest and shit. And they knew if they didn't do that shit, they'd be dead within a year.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. And we're laughing already because we have a really charming table of very talented people tonight. There is a terrific new play on Broadway called The Mother Bleep Bleep with the Hat, written by, I can't even say the title, The Mother with the Hat, written by Stephen Adly Guirgis, who has also written Jesus Topped the A Train and Our Lady of 121st Street, and we are delighted that he is joining us tonight on Theater Talk. The play also has two really terrific performances by Chris Rock, who's making his Broadway debut. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And welcome to Theater Talk.
Oh,
and really first-rate stage actor for many years here in the city, Bobby Cannavale, who was really wonderful in this play, and we're happy to have you at Theater Talk for the first time, too.
Thanks for having me.
All right, gentlemen, this is a play about a young man who is trying to get sober and his relationship with his sponsor. Bobby plays the young man, and Chris plays the sponsor. Stephen, what was it that got you thinking about this dynamic between the sponsor and the addict?
Oh gosh, here's a really exciting answer. I don't remember. I was in Chicago a couple of years ago, 4th of July, and I injured my back really badly, and I was in bed for about 10 days, and I couldn't move. And my company, Labyrinth, we go away every summer to workshop new material, and I wasn't going to be able to go. And then I was able to go for a day and a half, and I got up there, and I was like, I should try to write something. And just the first 20 pages kind of just poured out. And I'm not sure. You know, everything comes a little bit from life, a little bit from imagination. And I guess I just was finding it. I was keep coming up against how, as adults, things change, behaviors change, the sort of codes of conduct that we live by as younger people sometimes change, disappear as adults. And some ways it's bad, in some ways it's good, it's life. But it was just in my face all the time, and I just kind of
Well, the characters are so stark and so strong. When did you first see the play, Bobby?
I saw it at the Barnes series about 2 years ago. I went to a reading of it.
Which you were not in.
I was not in. The only people that were in that reading were Elizabeth and Yul, Rodriguez and Yul Vasquez.
Their names are, I'm sorry.
Elizabeth Rodriguez, who plays Veronica, and Yul Vasquez, who plays Cousin Julio. And I was just blown away.
When you see a reading like that, do you look at that role that you wind up playing, you think, I want that role?
Oh, I think that that's a great role. And I didn't think I would ever going to get to play it. You know, it was because it was for another actor, and so I just knew I'd probably go see the play a whole bunch of times. And yeah, I wish deep down that I could have played that role. So when the opportunity came up, I fought really, really hard for it. I had to read it a whole bunch of times. It was amazing, and every time I did, felt better than the last time, and it was a pleasure to read it every time because I love reading the play. Stephen's plays are awesome to read.
Now, Chris, were you looking to do a play? Were you looking to do something on Broadway when this came your way?
Yes and no. I'd been offered a couple of plays, and one I got really close to doing.
What was that?
I don't want to say, because then it takes away from the actor, right?
Yes.
Broadway diplomatic speak.
You know, the person that did the play should have been in the play, and they were great.
We don't have to do him any special favors.
Right. And they actually got nominated for a Tony. But but that fell apart because of something. And I don't know. So I was just reading plays, and
this was the best thing by far I'd seen. And I loved it, A, because it was contemporary. A lot of stuff I was reading was, period stuff.
Revivals and that sort of thing.
Revivals and, me as a black man, I really don't want to be in anything that happened before the Jackson 5. For sure. That's me. So it was nice to read something contemporary that appealed to people, not just that go to theater, but people that don't go to theater. That's what I liked about it. And yeah, they made me jump through hoops. So anybody that tells you, we wanted Chris Rock all along is lying.
Well, the thing with both of these guys is they came in there and proved it. You know, Bobby's a close friend. He lives 2 blocks away, a great actor. But when he had to come in and, when you got to come in and read for people you know, it's 10 times harder. And he came in and proved it every time. Chris came in to audition, and he came in with a script bound in leather with notes all over it. He was prepped, and he read great. And then, we went out to dinner, and all I got from this guy was like, I want to be great. I know that I don't know what I'm getting into, and I want to do it anyway. And the main thing was I felt like he was like one of us. Like he could have been, except for the fact that there's a rock at the end of his name, it could have been Chris from Labyrinth. And so they did a lot of showing up, suiting up, sublimation of ego. And
So you auditioned.
I auditioned, totally.
So it was not, we'll get the star for the play, and that's how it goes.
It was like a cold audition, too. Like, people were, like, kind of nice, but, they're like, I don't want to give you my hello can't be but so nice, because I might not have to, I want to be able to destroy you if I have to. I don't want to feel bad about it. So when I met Steven or I met Anna, it was, how are you? How are you? You know what I mean? It wasn't warm like it is now. It was like, and Scott was Scott in the room? Yes.
Scott Rudin, the producer.
Scott Rudin was in the room.
He's always a warm and welcoming presence.
Yeah, and I had to read. He was in the room, and I already had a relationship with him, but evidently it wasn't that close because I was reading for the play, right? It's like, my man, Scott Rudin. I thought, I thought I was in. Evidently, I wasn't.
Tracy Morgan's waiting in Scott Rudin's car.
Yeah, exactly.
But now it's interesting the dynamic between you two because you have a lot of chemistry on stage. But you have been on stage for a long, long time. Really great, accomplished theater actor. Your first time really doing a Broadway show. Yeah. Was he helping you at all? Were you watching him?
They all helped me.
All right. So
I mean, it's everybody.
We started, first day of rehearsal was Chris's birthday. And I only say that because, like, we bonded immediately, man. And, nobody for a second thought Chris was going to come in with an entourage or anything. I think we all expected, because it was a Labyrinth play as well, and it was Steven's work, that we were, and Anna, who comes from the world of ensemble theater, that it was
your director.
That we were going to just gel. And we did, man. We sung Happy Birthday, and then we kicked it off, and we were in our world from day one.
Did you ever feel behind at all? Did you ever think, whoa, these guys are really good? And
I felt behind. I still feel behind sometimes. I mean, really.
But Chris, you do. You perform for thousands of people and do plays. You are playing all the parts in the plays that you do.
Yes.
So you sure know how to hold stage and hold an audience.
Well, what's weird? When we were during the rehearsal process, none of my stand-up experience comes into play.
Why?
It just doesn't, because you work out stand-up in front of an audience for one, and just all 20 some odd years meant nothing. But once we got into previews and got in front of an audience, then some of my, I have like some advantages. My voice. Yeah.
This guy will never lose his voice, man.
I'm used to doing 2 hours by myself.
Right.
I'm used to playing much bigger places. So the whole projection thing started, you know what I mean? And even now I'm able to milk laughs, out of things that weren't there before, and but
But
only when we got to the stage, though.
But the issue, though, I guess you'd have to watch out for is having a strong comic personality. You are creating a character, and you can't just fall back on the comic stuff that you would.
Absolutely. I mean, the great thing is the writing is it's one of those things you can't mess it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I do my best, I give it my all, but this play is written in a way that 30 actors could play my part and be great in it, I believe.
Your characters are so specific. I mean, you really capture a part of New York, people in New York that we never see represented on Broadway. We never see it. We see for a play like Other Desert Cities by John Robin Bates, a fine play, but we see rich people living in Palm Springs. And you've tapped into this is the world you grew up in. These are the people that you know, the people you write about in Jesus Hopped the A Train in this play.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I grew up around a lot of different people. I grew up in, Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I love that play, Other Desert Cities. I love John Robin Bates. I love Kenny Lonergan is one of my favorite writers. We were talking about Neil Simon before, A.R. Gurney, but that's not my. It's not my thing. It's not what, that language is not what excites me. It's not what my ear goes to.
What is a particular challenge in doing Stephen's plays in terms of the language?
Just being confident that the words that are coming out, no matter how poetic they may sound or how fast they may sound, that they're not considered. That this is how they think, and they don't stop to think about it. This is just who they are. And, I think there could be a mistake made, not just in a play like Stephen's, but like a play like Nilo Cruz, for instance, who I've done his plays. His plays are very poetic, they're very different, but, in the same manner that, we don't have to sell this language, we just have to speak the language.
And maybe not always milk the jokes, because one of the things I like about this play is that every joke lands in this play. Every joke is funny. But you could see, you're getting bigger and bigger laughs, and you might want to get the laugh a little bit bigger. That's always a danger in a very funny play.
But I don't think of them as ha-ha jokes.
No,
It's all building. It.
Right, they're not.
Yeah.
They're not bada boom.
They're all in, like when you play football, they're in stride.
And it's a very well-made play, too. I said earlier, it reminded me of the great old Neil Simon plays in the early 60s, where the great jokes come out of the character and the situation and always land. And the thing is so tightly structured.
Beautifully structured.
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, you deal with one of the most sacred principles of AA, the sponsor-addict relationship. Has anybody got any flack about that? Because you turn it on its ear, that you what do you mean? You're the sponsor and you're not all you should be. Has anybody?
We don't want to give the play away, but we want to say that the sponsor is not an angel.
But I
Honestly,
yeah.
nothing but love.
Nothing but love.
Like, I mean, I'm a comedian, and I'm going to say 70% of comedians are in the program. I'm not in the program. I mean, you work in bars. It's just what it is. It's like, comedians are addicted to all sorts of things. And guys come back. Oh my God, I wish you were there the other night. Just got Jim Norton, Jim Norton, the comedian.
Yeah.
Woo! Just crying in my in my dressing room, just totally blown away. Colin Quinn, totally blown away. Robin Williams, totally blown. Like all these guys from the program, just totally.
Not to out them unless they've outed themselves.
I think they're pretty
all
much.
out there.
There's no comedian secrets.
No, I never saw it as any kind of indictment of the program. I mean, for one thing, you got a bunch of people who are working class people. They're people who have jobs. They're people who probably don't go around sharing their feelings a whole lot.
Yeah.
People that I know who have gotten involved with the program, who are very close to me, aren't big feelings sharing people. But they're people with a problem, and it's an amazing thing to be able to go to a place where there are a community of people who have the same trepidations and fears about sharing, and yet apply themselves to the principles of the program, which is that you do share with other people. And there's something really beautiful about that has nothing to do with medication. It's the treating of a disease through talk, to me, is just, it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. And I think Stephen celebrates that in a lot of ways. I think that first scene with Ralph, where he shows them going through the steps. Did you go to a meeting? Did you pray? Did you journal about it? All these things, these are all important steps keeping somebody on the right track, and they work on Jackie.
I'll say this about Steven.
Yeah.
He'd watch rehearsals, and people are gonna make mistakes during rehearsals. Any mistake you made about something that had to do with the program, my man got up. It's like, yo,
Third edition.
you have to say it like this.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, because it's, right now in church basements and complexes like all around the country, all around the world, people's lives are literally being saved because they're in those dingy rooms. So it's important. And even if you were going to write about Scientology, I'm not a huge fan of Scientology. I wouldn't say it to the degree of litigation,
Yeah,
but
I'm
like,
not going to equate those two things.
Back away, boys.
even if one was to write something about Scientology, there's no point in writing a piece that just says Scientology is no good.
Yeah.
Right.
It's and really I think with those program things, I think what even the most staunch program person will say is that the program in and of itself is perfect.
Yes.
The people aren't.
And that comes out in
nobody
your play.
gets into those rooms because they're like so well adjusted and
Yeah.
sane. you know?
The psychological dynamic between your two characters is interesting about the program because you're his sponsor, but as the play unfolds, at one point you say, I'm a sober person, but I'm not an angel. And you can see the person who's getting sober just make that sponsor a perfect person. And the disappointment that comes when you realize being sober doesn't mean you're perfect. And you don't think you're playing a villain in this play, though, right? I mean, your character does some things that might be considered reprehensible.
Yes.
But you don't.
No, I wouldn't call him the villain. He's like there's villains that are dastardly, like da 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 da. Then there's like Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive. He's just doing his job. Yeah. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, he's my favorite villain of all time.
Tommy Lee Jones.
Because he's not really doing, he's just doing his job. And sometimes people's jobs are diametrically opposed to your life.
It's interesting how you see that guy's job.
Yeah. And I don't want to give away the play, but
No.
Of course.
he has, my character has things that are his job.
Yeah, remember Chris Rock said that. He's doing his job.
They are diametrically.
How many people he's turned on to nutritional beverages in
Yes,
the city?
your
That's a positive.
Yes.
I want to ask you now, it's sort of the Broadway world that we're all in and you're new to. And I did write a column before the show opened, drawing attention to the fact that the box office wasn't great, and there was some talk about the play going to close early.
Chris Rock had dandruff. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And then the reviews come out, and it's great, and it's going to be doing very, very well. Did you pay any attention to any of that negative stuff that was out there? Does it get back to you when you're in the sort of sensitive period of a play in previews?
I mean, I paid attention to it.
Yeah, because you wrote to me.
If you wake up in the morning and read the New York Post, and you see not only that your show's about to close, but that it's like largely because of you, and it's like just we talked about this, but like patently untrue, it gets your attention, and then you got to go to work, and not just your friends, but the guys at the box office, the stagehands, everybody's got that look on their face, and you're thinking like, do they think that it's because of me, blah, blah, blah. It gets your attention. But that said, all of us work in an arena where we're in the public. We're in the public. You're in the public. We're all in the public. So we got a job, Bobby, Chris, me, where anyone can say whatever they want, and there's nothing really that you could do.
What was your reaction to that when he came to
I didn't care about like writing about the play closing in a week because I knew that we hadn't opened yet, and I believed in the play, and I think the play is incredible, and so I wasn't worried about that. The part that bothered me is that Steven's a good friend of mine, and then you called him out for being depressed, which I don't think we know that for sure, and I'm not sure. I don't think you do, but knowing many people that struggle with depression, my immediate thought was, well, I hope the guy doesn't have anybody in his life who suffers from depression, because I just thought it was mean. I thought it was rude and mean, and I thought anybody who's ever been depressed should be offended by this, and I was offended for him because he's a good friend of mine, and I know him not to be like that, and I was like, That just had nothing to do with the theater.
It's
to me.
also
Guy's
like,
a jerk.
No, well, it's also like that's kind of like your job, right? Your job is to like partially
jerk?
be a jerk and partially.
I'm Tommy Lee Jones.
You know, you got to keep people honest in your column, and sometimes you're provocative. But it's like, to me, it was like the source. You know, that's what killed me, the mystery source.
Hey, it opened with my name.
Yeah, how did you feel about that?
You know what?
Because in the Broadway world, Chris Rock is a box
That
office
is a
star.
weird thing.
Gotta
Like
sell
this
tickets.
play I didn't write. This play I had to audition to be in. This play that I'm so low on the totem pole, you know, in the world of Stephen and Scott Rudin and Labyrinth and the public, that my name is at the top of a story really kind of sucks. And if the play were to die, and I always say this is what it means to be a quote unquote star, whatever that is. We win, I lose. And this play is a success, and we're all here. But boy, if this thing would have closed last week, my face would have been right there.
My man's face was not happy that day. I had to talk to him.
It would have been like Chris Rock is this guy and he can't sell whatever.
That's what
it
the
would have
machine
came down to.
And the thing to me, though, that is like, you talk about the Broadway world. It's like, this is the Broadway world, where one week you're dead, the next week you're sitting at a table. The thing I kept thinking about was like, that's the Broadway world. But there's a world that I grew up in. And the world that I grew up in is like, someone does that to you, and, you know, it's like, what makes me think I'm sane enough not to, like, kick somebody's ass? I don't mean you, but I mean anybody.
All right, well, that said, so having
Yeah, it is weird to write something like that about this kind of play. You know what I mean? Because I would assume the guy that wrote this would punch somebody in the face. You know, you want to diss Driving Miss Daisy? What's that guy gonna do to me? You know what I mean? Like, the mother with the hat. I'm gonna go after that guy.
Yeah, that made no sense.
That's just like, what kind of sense does that make?
Well, I have to say, you have very loyal friends, because when that nasty little article came out, I was inundated by your friends. I mean, taking me apart 6 ways to Sunday, and then.
But we had a civil
course,
discourse.
I defy you to find a bad Tupac review of any album. I want you to.
But the point is, though, it had a happy ending. Because, and I wanted to ask you this, what was your feeling, having heard all this chatter and all this gossip and all this Broadway stuff? You give that opening night performance, and then those reviews start coming through, and this play may be the winner of the season. That's just kind of that.
It's nice. I'm glad that that this plays on Broadway. I don't get to see, we don't get to see plays like this on Broadway. And by this, I actually mean really great plays. Not just that it's this world, but that it's a great play. It's a great new American play. And, I subscribed to the New York Times for 10 years, and I've read so many stories about the death of the great American play for years now. And we're in an unbelievable season.
Great season.
Led by Stephen Guirgis, a guy from New York City who's been doing this for a long time, and we deserve to be on Broadway, and I always believed in the play.
And now you're the box office draw.
The play's the draw. And I'm very proud to be in it. I'm just proud that it is a play, like I said it before, it's a play for everybody. Yeah. It's not just the people that normally go to Broadway. It's not just the people that can afford $300 seats. You know what I mean? And we have this perception out there that things that appeal to lots of people aren't that good. And this defies that. This is it's like a Honeymooners episode. Like anybody it allows anybody in. Yeah. And it's just, I'm just so thank you again for allowing me to be in this great piece of art.
He's the Neil Simon of his time now.
Listen, let's shake hands, just so none of my friends come after you later.
Tommy Lee Jones.
That was big.
Tommy, that's right.
And
I'm
thank
just
you
doing
again.
my job, ladies and gentlemen. Just doing my job.
Thank you again for having the good, being such a good sport that you showed us
Oh,
today.
it's a
all
pleasure
of
to
you.
be here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you got it.
The play,
Fellas.
the play is the mother bleep bleep with a hat, and I say this from the bottom of my heart. It really is a terrific, terrific play. A very funny play, very moving play too, by Stephen Adly Guirgis.
Guirgis.
Guirgis. I'm sorry, Stephen.
That's it. That's it.
Say the title of the play once, just so we could bleep it.
The mother with the hat.
There we
They're the mother with the column right here. Chris Rock giving a terrific, terrific performance in the play. And the wonderful, as always, Bobby Cannavale. Congratulations, gentlemen, on this terrific play, and good luck.
Thank you.
Good, long, extended run.
Thank you, thank you.
Hey,
Hey,
I look good, right?
yeah,
You had to think about it?
nah.
What?
Was anyone here?
No, why?
Nah, just nobody was here.
I thought I just answered that.
What's up with the hat?
What hat?
That hat right there. That man hat, that ain't my hat, that's right over there.
That's not your hat?
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.
This week on Theater Talk,
People say, when did you first want to be an actor? When I starred as Prince Sparkle Eyes of the Fairies Forest and was a tormenting director.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
But why did you choose that business? Saving money and good management will succeed in any business.
Yes, saving money. But where can a woman get the money to save in any other business?
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
and I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
When Mrs. Warren's Profession opened in New York in 1905, they arrested the producer and all the actors. But now it is back.
Yes, and there are going to be no arrests here because these are really terrific performances in this fine revival of the great Shaw play. It's at the Roundabout, and it stars the brilliant, brilliant Cherry Jones, who won a Tony Award for Doubt, and that was the last time you were on Theater Talk.
It
You
was
were
indeed.
defending, what was her name?
Sister Aloysius.
Sister Aloysius. Welcome to Theater Talk, Cherry.
Not so much defending her as representing her.
It's representing her very well, too. And Cherry is supported in this production by one of my favorite actors, one of New York's favorite actors, Edward Hibbert, who, this is your second or third appearance on Theater Talk, I think.
I think it is.
Didn't you on Curtains, when you were in leather, you came on quite a bit.
I didn't come here in leather, but I wore leather in the show.
That's right.
And it's this
Next
jacket's
time I'll wear leather
first
for you.
appearance.
But the Curtains with Karen Ziemba,
Yes,
I
and
think.
David Hyde Pierce.
And then before that with Richard Easton when we did
Noises
Noises Off.
That's right. Well, welcome
Yeah,
back.
so the hat trick.
And now, I was just looking at Ben Brownlee's review for this production, and he calls you, Cherry, glittering, and you, Edward, reliable.
I know, good old reliable Hibbert.
I was just, what is it like when you read glittering, glittering, and reliable?
Listen, there are words I might have preferred to read, but I'll take reliable over a lot of other ones.
Have you, I went back and looked at the reviews you've had over the years, Cherry. Have you ever had a bad review? It seems to me you have always gotten over-the-top rave reviews from everybody.
I've heard from loved ones. I get slaughtered in this one too. I mean, you get bad reviews as well as good reviews. You can, and I remember someone telling me that Stella Adler stopped acting because she couldn't take the reviews. And I thought, wow, well, there seems to be an easy solution to that one, just don't read them. So I really try not to read them anymore.
I don't think they're helpful, but I'm going to be honest and say I admire and respect my colleagues who don't read them. I do, and voraciously. And I'll tell you why, because, I mean, it's a business, actually. Yeah. It's art, but it's also a business, and I like to know what's being said about the plays I'm in.
They say, though, even with a good review, sometimes if a critic can isolate a moment in a performance, it makes you self-conscious of what you're doing, and you might not be able to do it again. Is that a pitfall?
And you know what, basically, when they're good, they're never good enough, and when they're bad, they're unreadable. And as long as we all know that, we can get on with it.
Good old reliable Edward.
That's it. Reliable Edward speaks.
All right, this is Shaw play is one of my favorites, and after all these years, it still seems to have the power really to shock an audience. Cherry, if you could just tell us the character you're playing and why you were interested in tackling this role this particular time.
Mrs. Warren is a woman who came from a horribly impoverished, deprived childhood, had an older, wiser sister who went into prostitution very early on, made a ton of money, and then got her little sister into the business. Her other two sisters, who were the respectable ones, died from lead poisoning in a white lead factory, and the other one was probably beaten to death by her drunken husband. So this young woman knew at an early age there had to be another option. She could make money, save money, and grow as a wily prostitute. And she and her sister eventually opened houses on the continent, brothels on the continent. She got wealthy English investors, and now she's filthy rich and owns brothels in Budapest, Vienna, Brussels, Ostend. And she had a child at a young age, and wanted this child to be respectable and have the childhood she didn't have. So she's boarded out this child and made sure she's had everything she's ever needed. She's boarded her with wonderful people. She's had the best schools England could offer. And now this young woman has come of age, and now it's time
for mother and daughter to meet.
For mother and daughter to really meet as adults. And she's still not ready for the daughter to know the truth, but the daughter, of course, is now gleaning the truth, and that's where the play begins.
One of the things I'm always fascinated about the Shaw characters is that he gives Vivi, your daughter, sort of the proper way of seeing the world. Prostitution is bad, it's exploiting the girls. But then he gives the speeches to Mrs. Warren and to her investor capitalist. And even though he wants you people to be kind of represent the evil capitalist, he gives you such great speeches. And you find yourself saying, well, actually, she has a point about being a prostitute.
A friend of mine in my dressing room the other night said Shaw is a torturer. You know, because he really does make you sit and listen to all different sides of the argument.
And you take everybody's sides. There is no black or
no
white in this play, which is why it's so fascinating to play.
He says in the introduction that the alternative in this play is not between morality and immorality, but two sorts of immorality.
It's funny. I mean, it's again like doubt. People come down one way or the other on this play, and the end of the play.
It's a wonderful journey of a play. It leads you to believe, as it begins, a pastoral English garden, this fascinating, independent young girl.
You come in.
The artist friend, the best friend of Kitty Warren. So we're into that lovely world of epigrams and manners. And then, slowly, we get into a world of capitalism, secrets, lies, chock-a-block with great lines. I mean, I can't believe this man was, I think, 37, and he gives Kitty Warren, a line right at the end of the play, "Lord help the world if everyone took to doing the right thing." I think that's a genius.
Well, that's Shaw. You know, there was the famous Max Beerbohm character of him standing on his head, because he flips everything on its head. The whole view of morality, of capitalism, twists again and again. It's fascinating. You know a little about the history of the play. Why were the actors arrested? Do we know
I
that?
think because if you think about what this play embraces,
prostitution.
Never mind prostitution, the suggestion of incestuous romance between two characters. I think it was wildly ahead of its time.
Yeah. And a prostitute who, doesn't die of consumption, not only doesn't die of consumption, is proud of her,
What is that great line you have? Do you know how rich
I am?
Yeah.
He was criticized. He was criticized for not making her villainous enough.
Right.
And he said, if I'd made it Mr. Warren's profession and Mr. Warren were a bookmaker, no one would object to gambling being evil. But it's the
you read that forward.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, but she's not villainous on one level. I don't regard Kitty as a
No,
villain
I don't think
at
he
all.
did either.
I think
Yeah.
she speaks very eloquently through Shaw about why she did what she did, which is again why I think you don't go and say, well, that's the good angel of the play and that's the bad demon. I don't think it's
But it is interesting. She does, Vivi has that wonderful line right near the end of the fourth act when she says, Mother, I'm probably the only young woman you've ever done good to. Don't spoil it now. And Mrs. Warren says, yes, heaven forgive me, it's true.
Yeah.
So it's just heaven to get to, because there's no black and white, it's all gray.
No.
And
Shaw.
it also shows you, as you were saying, when Shaw says wildly and you pump up the fireworks there, there is, I think, sometimes an unfair rep that Shaw gets that the plays are too heady, intellectual. I remember one critic saying, the problem with Shaw is that he's only alive from the neck up. But you see how visceral
I don't think
this...
this is true of this play at all.
Yeah.
And I think it is so modern. I mean, I listen to it quite a lot. Normally after you get into a run, you turn that speaker down and put your iPod in. But I listen to this resolutely.
Yeah, every night.
One
I
of the
never miss
great
a
lines,
word.
I want this to be tattooed on me somewhere. I must have work and excitement or I shall go melancholy mad. I mean, how modern stuff is this? It's true. And the play ends, talk about modernity. She says, that's why I have to get rid of you. I mean, this is like the stuff of a contemporary play. The fact it's set in an Edwardian period with different values, I think a lot of the politics and the hypocrisy in this play are, God knows, resonant today.
Well, Shaw had a very complex relationship with his mother, right? Didn't she
Oh,
sort
yes.
of?
Yeah, she left him, yeah.
Well, remember there was a menage a trois going on in the
Right,
house.
that's right.
Because there was Shaw's father, but Shaw's mother was in love with Shaw's music teacher.
Right.
That's
And the
right.
music teacher moved into the house.
Is that on the Holroyd book? Did you read that?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
We're talking about the Michael Holroyd book, which is a 3-volume, brilliant assessment of Shaw's life. And if you look at a lot of Shaw's plays, there is often menage a trois, triangles. So in this play, you have Vivi and the boy she likes, and then into it comes your business partner who wants Vivi. And you have this triangle. That it becomes a pattern in a lot of Shaw's plays. Interesting. While I have you two great actors here, I just want to get a sense of how you began, what got you started, why you wanted to be an actor. I mean, you grew up in
Paris, Tennessee.
Tennessee, and what was going on in little Cherry Jones's life in Paris, Tennessee, where she says, "I want to be Mrs. Warren someday."
Well, I just always loved doing. Probably just always was one of those little kids who was always putting something on and performing. And I had a whole gang. We lived in the woods, and we would, create all sorts of dire situations, and we'd have swords, and we just played full-out fantasy all the time. And I just always wanted, to keep it up and never really have to grow up. And so I saw this woman when I was 8 years old at the Barter Theater in Abingdon, Virginia. They were doing The Country Girl, and my parents, we were passing through, and my parents didn't have a babysitter, so they brought 8-year-old me, and the lights went, and this woman came down to the lip of the stage, and the lights went out on her, and it was the old lights that used to ghost. You remember you'd have to count to 3 before you could move, because it would go to black, and then it would ghost on you, and then it would go to a full blackout. Well, the woman said her last lines, the lights went to black, and then they did that ghosting, and I thought it was her soul. Like I thought it was this last burst of this beautiful woman who'd been, and we were on the front row, and I just thought, ooh, yeah, that's what I want to do.
For the rest
I want to, yeah.
It's interesting you say about the playing, because we had Chris Walken on last year when he was in a Behanding in Spokane. He said, well, I'd go out and my friends and I would go to movies and we'd reenact the movies in the parking lot. And he said, you know, and after all these years and all these acting lessons and all this stuff, it's still basically going out in the parking lot and playing around and pretending.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Edward, though, you came from a theatrical family.
I came
so
from a
you grew
theatre
up in the
family, and I
business.
think, to make a long story short, if you grow up in the home of working actors, you get a very, very eyes wide open look at what the business is like, which I was glad for. They never pushed me, but it became palpably clear when at the age of 11, I wrote, starred, and directed in my own production of The Fairy Forest in my parents' two-tiered garden in Epsom, Surrey.
Somehow I feel your upbringings were slightly different. The forest
Yes,
you're
but it
talking
all
about.
comes out in the wash. You know?
Sorry, go on.
So people say, when did you first want to be an actor? When I starred as Prince Sparkle Eyes of the Fairies Forest and was a tormenting director. I'm writing a one-man show and I say I was the Erich von Stroheim of Windmill End, Epsom, Surrey. The children were maimed with gardening tools if they showed up 1 minute late for rehearsal. And then we fast forward and I went to RADA, which I still say, and I am a great believer in that particular institution, is the best training an actor can have. Sally was at RADA too.
Yeah.
I loved it there. It was a short course because guess what, folks? You don't learn how to do it.
Yeah.
They give you the tools, the craft. I was glad of it. I enjoyed it. But then when you are blessed to get the keys of the kingdom, and in your early years as an actor, go to work at, as mentioned earlier, I think, Chichester Festival Theatre, in the company of Alec Guinness, Joan Plowright, and Maggie Smith. Well, that is worth the training. So I was able to observe and watch 3 master craftsmen at work.
Can I ask you, what did you learn from each of the 3 people? Can you just give us a sense
Different
of
things. Guinness is extraordinary economy. I mean, he played Shylock, and it was absolutely brilliant.
economy of gesture?
Of choice, of gesture. He can mine a word by doing so little. Joan's extraordinary eccentricity as an actress, and Maggie's breathtaking command of language. I mean, what she can do with a word is worth 3 years at RADA. Yeah. I would say.
Did you have an experience like that, Sherry? Were you ever in a production where you were with some well-known actors that you were watching or learning from?
Well, I was lucky. I got to go to the American Repertory Theater in about 1980 as a member of the company. And it was a true rep. We were performing at night, rehearsing another play by day. And all of those, I was the youngest member of the company, and Brustein had just moved from Yale to Harvard.
Bob Brustein.
And brought with him people like Tony Shalhoub.
Oh, yeah.
And my friends Tommy Dara and Karen MacDonald, who was a Boston actress who came into the company. And they were all like my older brothers and sisters, and they were so accomplished. And I'd had this wonderful Yale graduate school. I played Rosalind that first season, and I remember just taking my Shakespeare to each of them and saying, "Now, what does this mean? And how do you beat out?" You know, and they took me under their wing, and we had such amazing directors up there too. I worked with Sir Bond 5 times at a particularly fertile time in his career, so I really got to learn from these. And just being in a company that's that tight. We took a 3-month tour of Europe, playing all of the festivals. And when we came back, we were so tight, you could have thrown any play at us.
And you would have
and we could have just done it. You know,
It's the
'cause
joy of repertory, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we
It
just...
doesn't happen anymore. You
No,
see.
well,
I mean,
you were in rep in England,
yes,
weren't you?
that's what you do in England. What you're talking about is what I cut my teeth on. But I wish, you know, it's been said many times, but you know, one does go to a national theatre, and sometimes one doesn't have a good time when one sees what one sees. But it still is a place where there is a you're moving from watching a Harold Pinter play to a new David Hare play to a revival of a 17th century comedy. This is amazing, and we don't have it, and it's a great shame.
You know, it's interesting what you say. I was talking to Brian Dennehy the other day, a wonderful actor, and Brian was saying, you know, we have these big movie stars, they come to Broadway, and they're doing 12 weeks and 14 weeks. And he said, you know, I don't get the play until 6 months into the run.
It's the
is
truth.
that
I love
true?
a long run.
I still wish we could give I wish people who come during previews, they could buy a preview ticket, and for $10
come
more,
back
they
again.
could come back the last week of the run, because it would be a completely different experience. I mean,
Especially with a play like this.
yeah, I mean, this play just has to marinate and marinate, and I think we all are feeling that we're just now getting to a place that we can really grow from, you know, to the rest of the run. I mean, it's a completely different experience than it was those first couple of weeks. And so I'm not going to say I'm going to subsidize those tickets, but I'll meet you afterwards if you come again.
It's interesting, though. Do you also feel that you really only start getting into the performance after?
Well, it's interesting because I was blessed to be introduced to this play. Well, I'd seen it several times, but I was introduced to it because Emily Mann did a production at the MacArthur Theatre in Princeton, which I was in playing Mr. Praed, the part I'm playing now. But I realized the run at Princeton, like any regional theatre, we had a run which was not quite as long as the preview period we had. So there was a lot of investigation left, and I'm so glad to be back.
He did it with the brilliant Suzanne Bertish. So the first couple of weeks rehearsal, I just had to get over the fact that he'd just come away from playing.
Not just, darling. We get a bit of breathing time between it. But I may be, people may think I'm eccentric and mad. I'm sure they do. But I love a long run. I seem to have done an awful lot of them. But I mean, I like
I do too.
I like the whole ritual of it. I like those ebbs and flows. I
The
like
steady paycheck.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt. I like venting my... Cherry knows about this. I mean, I have this thing. If I don't like an audience, I vent after the
Where
show.
do you vent?
Well, it's the degree of a smile
Mr.
I'll do
Creepy
at the
Pants.
curtain call. I'm not kidding you. It may sound childish. If they are tiresome, bronco, irritating, and the cell phones, they are dead people. I say 1 ring, unfortunate. 2, be really afraid. 3, come see me after the show. I'm not for a drink.
What did you say, Mr. Creepy Pants?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What do you mean, Mr. Creepy Pants? Because I do this sometimes?
No, he would early on in previews, if the audience was not suiting Mr. Hibbert, he would make it well known to, you know, every cast member, every crew member, and Doug would come back and say, "Don't let Mr. Creepy Pants infect you."
No, I have no time for it. But I'm saying back to a long run, then you get the wonderful. You get a. We've had it, you know, a matinee audience who want to take home your lovers so much, and then a Wednesday night from absolute hell.
I just wanted to say that when we did Doubt,
Now, did you give Donald Muller wine to drink?
we did 708 performances, including the tour.
That's right, yeah.
And it wasn't until late in the tour in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when I felt like I'd finally gotten it. And that's
But
the
that's
honest
beautiful,
to gosh
isn't
truth.
it? I mean,
Yeah.
This is after the Tony Award, all of the accolades, everything.
Minneapolis is the place I go, yes!
Is
that
there
was...
a moment in a performance where you realize that one particular performance, one particular line, one scene where you suddenly go, I've got it now?
Well, I think, like, for me, it's like once every 6 weeks or something, you go, ooh, that each scene sort of landed right where one hoped it would. It's still not where you ever want it to be. It's the famous Martha Graham letter to Agnes de Mille where she says, there is no... Do you all not know that letter?
No.
I've got it in the frame.
Everybody go Google Martha Graham's letter to Agnes de Mille. It's the most
genius.
brilliant thing.
What does she say?
But at one point she says in it, there is no satisfaction whatsoever at any time, only a queer, divine dissatisfaction.
That's right.
And that's the life of the artist.
And you're
'cause
always furrowing around with a text. I mean, I suppose there's a shelf life. I mean, a Shaw play, that's always going to be worth investigating it further. Noises Off is like good Chinese food. It's like a wonder. It is a joy. We did that play at a time when America was devastated. We opened a month after 9/11.
That's right.
And it was really quite moving to hear these people returning to the theatre. And these howls of laughter of what is probably the greatest farce ever written.
Yeah.
But you can't be minding a subtext in the farce.
I saw you the night you dropped the bottle.
You go on about that. It's one night.
I swear to you, I went to see, there's a scene where they're throwing bottles all
And
over
I
the
said,
farce.
don't you do that. I don't like props. Don't let me have to do that.
And
But
he dropped the bottle and it bounced because it was rubber.
I think actually what happened was it bounced and I picked it up again and got around. So let's get over that right now. Yeah.
It was brilliant. I thought, Edward, drop the bottle.
But that's my point, though. I mean, there are Doubt language plays with character-driven narrative. That's, you sink your teeth into it.
Yeah, yeah.
Others, not so much.
Yeah, well, your first one on Broadway, your debut with Lillian Gish.
No.
No, sorry.
Lillian Gish.
Evil
Evil Gallion, I'm sorry.
The great Evil Gallion.
Yes,
I
yes,
was
yes.
just new in New York, and I got asked to go and meet her, and I'll never forget her, this extraordinary woman with the manners that belie a long life in the theatre. I mean, you haven't been in to meet people and just, you can't even believe the lack of charm. But she got up from her seat, she came forward, she engaged. We were asked to choose a little bit of one of the Alice's characters, and we read, and she was absolutely extraordinary, and the dignity and the nobility of her, both as a director, and sadly it was very short-lived.
It was her adaptation of Alice in
Yes,
Wonderland.
which she'd
that she
done
directed.
before.
Yeah.
In New York, back when she had her theatre company.
The Civic Rep.
And exactly.
Was it any good?
Was the production good? It was absolutely breathtaking to look at, but the problem was, it was like being in Madame Tussauds. We were also incarcerated in the costumes of all these characters. I think Lewis Carroll's words were sort of like a scrim between us and them. It was breathtaking to look at. I think it was John Lee Beatty who did the sets. And we opened at Christmas, and I'm afraid we were the biggest turkey in Christmas that season.
That happens. When you say encased in these things, you have these fantastic Kathy Zuber, I think, costumes that you wear. These big bustles and these massive
I look like a
hats.
cruise liner. And in the final scene of Battleship.
You do.
Yes.
You have this big, gigantic pirate hat on.
Yeah.
Was it you who once told me that you found, when you were working on Sister Aloysius, you got the glasses? The glasses were the key to the character. Is it the hats here?
You know what? From the first day I saw those costume sketches, and from the first day I was wearing this big old dilapidated straw hat because I knew that was going to be such a huge part of the character, and the fan, which I threw away in a preview, and the parasols, and I got all the accoutrement because I knew it was gonna.
So that's how you work. You like the
I don't
props
necessarily like those props, but I knew I was going to have to deal with them, so I just got used to them early on.
And you have that fabulous tarty wig.
Oh, that wig! I know the wig was very important.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
sort of
Mrs. Lovett.
It's sort of Mrs. Lovett meets Colette.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's good.
That's right. And your hair isn't so bad either, Edward. It's fuller than I remember it being.
It might be, yes.
And a different color. I've seen it. All right, there is as much fun on stage as they are off stage. Cherry Jones and Edward Hibbert in Mrs. Warren's Profession at the Roundabout Theater till
November 28th.
November 28th. And see the last performance, because then you'll really be cooking.
That's right. We
You don't
promise.
get your $10 from Cherry to come back.
And no cell phones or Mr. Creepy Pants. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't you be led astray by people who don't know the world, my girl.
The only way for a woman to provide for herself decently is for her to be good to some man that can afford to be good to her. If she's in his own station of life, let him make her marry her. But if she's far beneath him, she can't expect it. Why should she? Ask any lady in London society that has daughters, and she'll tell you the same, except that I tell you straight and she'll tell you crooked. That's all the difference.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.
This week on Theater Talk.
The trick is to trust when the time comes that the technique will be there. If on one of those nights it just is not happening,
Right.
your technique will support you and carry you through.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
I'm delighted tonight to be joined by one of the great actors, F. Murray Abraham, who is about to open off-Broadway in a terrific production of The Merchant of Venice. He's been doing this for quite a while now, and there's been a lot of talk about Al Pacino's on Broadway, but I urge you to see this one. A colleague of ours, Jim Shapiro from Columbia University, Susan, who was on the show to talk about The Merchant of Venice a couple of months ago, said he thought of all the Shylocks he's seen.
I'm fondest of Murray's.
F. Murray Abraham.
F. Murray Abraham plays a Shylock that scared the living daylights out of me.
And Jim has seen a lot of Merchants of Venice, and you know Jim.
Yeah.
And you know he has studied this play for years and years. He said, "But you're the Shylock."
When we did this originally here in New York, it was a hit, and it was successful, and we sold out right away.
Mm-hmm.
But when we took it to England, Stratford-on-Avon, we were a big success there too. I'm not really just patting myself on the back. It was a great thing for the American actor and the American theater that the Brits really not only accepted us and our production, but they embraced it.
That's very interesting, though, because there is this feeling that sometimes you get from the British actors that Americans just really can't pull off Shakespeare as well as they can.
Well, you get a lot of that from the critics. I think the public accepts us.
Is there anything to that at all? I mean,
Well,
British actors have more of a feel for it than some American actors do?
They have their feel for it, and we have ours. And I think that we have a lot to learn from each other.
Weren't you
Diplomatic
compared?
answer.
Yes, I was going to say, weren't you compared favorably with Olivier by
Yes,
British
I
in that
was,
role? Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
By one of the leading Shakespeare critics in the world.
Oh well, that's pretty good.
I'm shameless. I'm so sorry. But I'm very proud of that. I liked Olivier. He was one of my idols.
Absolutely. What is your attack on the role of Shylock? I mean, when Jim Shapiro was here, he said, there's no two ways about it. It's an anti-Semitic character. Do you play up that aspect of it?
I think what makes it a universal piece is that it's really about an outsider. It's about much more than anti-Semitism, which it is. Mm-hmm. It's an anti-Semitic play. But I can't imagine making this Shylock a universal character if I think only in those terms. Mm-hmm. So I sometimes would think of him as a Palestinian in an Israeli court, or an American Indian in an American court in the old days, or on and on. It's a universal expression of a need and a search for justice. Everyone understands that. And that's really what I try to put into my character, into this wonderful, amazing man, Shylock.
And what about the villainous aspect of him, though? Because Shakespeare intended him as a villain, and you must have fun with that, with making him the bad guy in some ways.
Well, I suppose this is the big trick that Shakespeare pulled off, because until Shylock, Jews had never been depicted as anything but villains and devils, not even human. This is the first time he was endowed with human qualities. And I think the only way to temper that for that society then was to allow it to be anti-Semitic, but also human. It was a huge breakthrough.
Because you certainly understand why he has a grudge. And you certainly you bring out, all the very real grievances that this man has and how he's been treated very shabbily.
It's hard to imagine what it would be like to be vilified in the streets, legally, spat upon, kicked, beaten, and put up with it. And not only that, but succeed. And that's what he's done. But I think there's a lesson to be learned in that. The thing about my Shylock is he is not out for revenge immediately. He really just wants to establish a place of dignity. And that's what the pound of flesh begins to be. But when everything is taken from him, when his daughter is finally taken from him, then I think he turns to revenge. That makes him, I think, much more palatable and acceptable and understandable to a current audience. Everyone has experienced feelings of revenge, I think. I think I'm safe in saying that. Indulging those feelings is quite another thing.
But that's an issue in the play, though, too, that when this man is the outsider and he has the moment of revenge, it has to be tempered, and he can't temper it himself. He's going to go and he's going to kill for it.
I guess it's a passion that any of us who have been carried away with any kind of a passion, whether it's love or hate, we find ourselves in the middle of this thing that we know is terribly damaging, and we just can't stop ourselves. it's just this pull to do this evil, bad thing. And it's like sucking a sore tooth. You can't stop. And it finally destroys him, I think. And the worst thing about it is that he knows it's going to help to hurt his society of Jews that lives in Venice at the time. But he still can't stop himself. And he's a deeply religious man, but he still insists on doing this thing which his religion is absolutely against.
Right.
Is cutting into another person's flesh.
And yet he justifies.
He just can't stop. He knows when he commits himself to it that he's damning himself.
Why do you think that Shakespeare, if with this being the tragedy of Shylock, puts that comic turn in the fifth act, and ends the play the way he does?
You're asking a question that critics for 400 years have been trying to work out. It's interesting how it's been treated. There was a long period of time where that act was cut.
Oh, really?
Yes, Shylock's exit was the end of the play. So however you work it out is really up to you. And I think that's one of the values to seeing both of these productions, sees Al's, who's a friend of mine, and mine, because they're quite different productions.
Yes, they are.
And quite different performances.
Have you seen Al's?
Oh, yes.
And does it influence you at all?
No, that's his.
Yeah.
Mine is mine.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of respect for each other. We're both very serious.
Have you talked about playing this role with him?
No, but I dropped a note off to him. He's making a flick right now. That I would like to have a conversation with him about it publicly, so that, because I could use some publicity. I mean, he's using up all the audience. I want people to know that this is a great chance to see two Academy Award-winning actors, serious, devoted actors,
doing one of the great roles of all time.
Exactly. It's never, historically, it's never happened
Well,
before.
Al will just say, if you'd like to come on Theater Talk with your friend F. Murray Abraham and devote a whole show to playing Shylock, you're welcome anytime.
And let's hope that little paper, the New York Times, gets onto this idea, too.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Speaking, though, of other Shylocks, you have seen other great Shylocks before.
Oh, yeah.
In your mind, the best?
Well, I have to say mine.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
Good.
I was just going to say, aside from yours, was there one you saw as a young actor, young man that?
So many. I think I saw Olivier's.
Well, I want to ask you, what was Olivier's like?
It was terrific. It was terrific. I happen to be a big fan. Some people didn't like it.
Yeah.
I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah.
There was that wonderful other British actor, wonderful actor. What's his name? We talked about.
Oh, Henry Goodman.
Henry Goodman.
Saw that one, yeah.
He did a thing. I'm not going to do it. I'll do my own thing. But
Yeah,
he did a thing I've never seen before in the trial scene at the end of the Quality of Mercy speech, where when she got finished making this beautiful appeal, he didn't do a thing for about 10 or 15 seconds. Just sat there, and you wondered, is he going to let it go? Is he going to go for the pound of flesh? It was a very courageous thing to do.
Now, when you are
I do something quite different.
Right. I was going to say, when you're putting together your Shylock, having seen all these others, do you say, I can't do this, I'm not going to take from that one, I'm going to do something deliberately different because I've seen other actors do it and I don't want to repeat it?
Listen, I'm a highly technical actor. I really do work hard on the work, and I do a lot of research and so on. But I'm an instinctive actor. I'm absolutely instinctual. And I really allow it to carry me wherever it is going to go. Even during a performance, I just let it take me. It's a pretty exciting ride. It doesn't always work. But when it does, it's thrilling. It's thrilling to see an actor who's willing to take those chances. It inspires other people to do the same.
That's the only reason to do it, though, right? I mean, what's the point of getting up there to act if you're not going to roll the dice and see how far you can go with it?
What you're saying is absolutely true, but to commit yourself to it is a little dangerous and fun. That's why I do it.
When you say sometimes it doesn't work out, can you give us an example of a performance that you did where it didn't work out and the choice you made and when you realized it had gone wrong?
Well, sometimes you get to a point where you think that you're inspired. Yeah. You'll go in this direction with it. And you get in the middle of it, you think, this is crap. And then you try to pull yourself back and you get back on track, and it happens.
So is that what you mean by dangerous?
Yes,
yeah.
That's the danger.
Yeah.
It's much, by the way, it's much like in baseball, if a pitcher has a no-hitter going into the seventh inning, you're not supposed to talk to him. The other players pretend like it's not happening. They just ignore it completely. It's in a great performance, if you're in the middle of it, if you ever stop and say, this is a great performance, it's suddenly it's gone, baby.
Yes.
How interesting.
And if you commit yourself to that kind of, if you trust that instinct, if you trust that inspiration, that's where the great performances come from.
I love to talk about acting, and since we have you here, one of the great actors, I want to touch on what you said, though. You are instinctual, but also technical.
Yeah.
Is it not true that to really pull off a performance, to really be a good actor, you always have to have that technical ability running sort of alongside your instinctive ability?
Yeah.
And how does one sort that out? The running with it and yet knowing if I lift my hand this way, I'm going to get this kind of laugh. If I look that way, I'm going to get that kind of laugh. How do you keep the two things in your head at the same time?
Yeah, well, that's the trick. I think that is the trick. The Japanese technicians, when they have assistants, when they have apprentices, they're not allowed to touch the work for at least 2 or 3 years. They are just assisting, watching, learning, before they even begin to touch, whether it's clay, whether it's pottery, whether it's the theater, so that when they do finally get an opportunity to perform, whether it's making something or acting, all of the technique is there to support whatever they do. And you never stop working on that. I'm talking about vocally as well as spiritually, by the way. And that's the trick, is to trust when the time comes that the technique will be there. If on one of those nights it just is not happening,
right,
your technique will support you and carry you through. And you get to a certain point where the performance is always good. When I say it's crap, I don't mean it's really crap. Used to be, but now I can get away with stuff, you know? Because I've been doing it for 50 years. I mean, I should be able to do it, you know?
But you know when it's not working, but you can fool the audience.
Oh, God. And sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you think this is awful, and then people come back and say, that was terrific. And sometimes you think it's terrific, and they say, you know.
Well, that terrible experience with the little acting I've done, that you're observing yourself, and every moment you're going, that's terrible. That's terrible.
She's right.
Yeah.
That is bad acting.
And
I'm guilty of it, too.
But teaching the technique, though, it seems in the way acting goes nowadays that people just want to plunge in and become a star, because a lot of young people get a TV show, they get a movie, and you know, they're an instant success, and then they come to Broadway and they try it, and you see the technique was never there.
Yeah, you can spot it immediately.
You can spot it in just the sound of a voice. That's not a stage voice.
I think you can spot it as soon as someone steps on the stage.
Really?
It's an aura. People go, oh, damn, this, we're in for a good ride here. This is a good thing. You can tell, you can smell it, you can feel it. But I also think it's one of the reasons that there were so many suicides among, and still are, among artists, performers, who have this enormous amount of fame.
And get built up,
Built up, and they really, really think they know what they're doing. And in fact, when it starts to taper off, they got no place to go.
Right.
They have nothing to rely on. They're completely lost.
But isn't that a corruption? I mean, you walked away from Hollywood. Not didn't walk away, but you didn't move to Hollywood and become that. And did that have something to do with this very corrupt system where they kind of destroy psyches and lives with the fame system?
I don't think it was that altruistic. Thank you for putting me in that category. But it's just that the stuff that was offered was such crap.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was a lot of money.
But it's the money, I
just said, no, I'm doing all right. You know, I want to stay here and do my work.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because it was Amadeus, you won the Oscar, and then you started to get the Salieri roles. Is that not what happens? They keep giving you the same sort of thing? Oh, you're going to be the scary, menacing villain.
It's absolutely true. For the first 15 years of my career, I was only doing comedy, all comedy. Yeah. And as soon as Salieri happened, it's been all like sinister villains and stuff. And I'm funny.
You're such a funny guy. I have to say, I've never met you before.
You got to see the Ritz. I mean, you got to see it. It's a wonderful movie.
You were in the original Broadway production and the movie version.
Yeah.
But it's funny you say that, because you're really quite funny and charming. But my image of you is Salieri, and I thought, interviewing F. Murray Abraham, and I was a little intimidated because there's going to be the demonic Salieri.
Funny.
Why did you decide to become an actor? How old were you? What was the impressionable moment in your life where you thought, I got to be looked at?
You know, this thing about how you become who you are is like a mystery sometimes. In my case, it really is, because I was a hoodlum. I was a gang member when I was I'm from El Paso, Texas. And it was Pachucos in those days. And my friends were all Mexican, Chicanos. and I speak Spanish, and I spoke with a Mexican accent. And in these gangs, which were the precursors of the Bloods and the Crips, we were not as violent as they were. I mean, I was never in a fight where anyone was killed. But at 16, a teacher said, "You try this. Don't ask me why or what she saw." And it changed my life.
What did you try?
It sounded like a pretty fun idea. A lot of girls in the theater. But no, I'm making a joke. It just seemed to communicate to me. And I went to a play. I saw a guy I knew was on the stage, and I was transformed.
Do you remember what the play was?
No, I don't. But I remember the first play I did that
Which
was
was?
successful for me, which was The Old Lady Shows Her Medals, which we took into a state contest in Texas.
Really?
And I won, and I got a scholarship, and I went to school. Otherwise, I never would have.
The Old Lady Shows Her Medals. I've never even heard of that.
It's a great one-act play.
By?
J.M. Barrie.
Oh, right. Yeah. And that was it for you. A J.M. Barrie play transformed your life.
Absolutely. That woman did. Teacher.
Yes.
What was her name?
Lucia P. Hutchins. God rest her soul.
And she
I
saw.
am forever indebted to her.
And she saw something in this.
She saw something that I didn't know was there. That's a teacher.
But isn't it interesting that a teacher transformed your life and you have remained a teacher yourself?
Yeah.
Even though you have a very successful acting career, unlike so many, you've gone back to Brooklyn College and become a master teacher of acting.
Well, I think it's a tribute to her.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing
Interesting,
that out.
interesting.
That's very important to me.
Where did you get your? When did you realize, as a young, you're a teenager acting, winning awards? When did you realize? Oh, I got to get some technique here too. It's not all just winning awards and having a good time. It's work.
I just knew that there were things I had to change. Being in a gang and then separating from the gang is very hard to do. It means you really have to change your life. So I began to listen to what I sounded like, and I knew I couldn't be an actor with a Mexican accent. So I started to listen to recordings, which I still have. Old recordings of Barrymore. I have vinyl. I have Barrymore and Olivier and Gielgud.
Really?
I still have them.
So you trained yourself how to speak without an accent by listening to the greatest actors in the English language.
And American.
And American.
Barrymore.
Right.
Yes, I did. It's not a big deal. Just do it.
I just have this image of you as a little gang member putting on your Laurence Olivier record.
Yeah, I got some scars to prove it.
Did the gang try to pull you back in?
Oh, yeah.
What did they make of your doing acting in the play?
It was derisive, derisive. It was a lonely time, but I knew it was right. It was like a calling. I really believe it was the hand of God. I do.
And Ms. Hutchins.
Yes, through Lucia.
Yeah. You started out, though, doing comedy, as we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? I mean, what was the first comic role that you got? And did you think, well, this is what I'll be doing for my life? I'm a funny guy.
Yeah, well, I guess I always like to tell jokes. I suppose that's part of it. But I think if I had a choice, I'd only do comedy.
Really?
Yeah. For one thing, you can't fool yourself when you're on stage and you're doing comedy. You can't say, oh, this was good, because if they're not laughing, it's not any good. I don't care what anyone says, how good it's got. They have to, you can trick yourself when you're doing tragedy because you don't know. You take it for granted. And besides, with tragedy, even if it's not real good, the message of the play gets through. It's going to affect someone.
Right.
But with comedy, well, I'll tell you. I did Macbeth. And while I was doing it, my wife at one point said, I can't live with you like this. She's a very good cook, my wife, Kate. 50 years we've been together. She cooked a lot of stuff. She said, it's in the freezer. I'm going to the house in the country. Goodbye. She said, I was moaning in my sleep. I was thrashing around. I was snapping at her. She said, goodbye. I'll be back in a couple of months, weeks. Really. So comedy doesn't affect me that way.
Well, how does your Shylock affect you? How's your wife putting up with your Shylock?
I love Shylock. Except for that thing that he commits himself to, the cutting of the flesh. I'm devoted to his passion and to his humanity and his need for justice. I hate that these guys who almost brought our country to its knees have gotten away with murder, that no one has been brought to task for this banking system that they've destroyed. No one. That's my sense of justice.
That's good.
And that's what I feel with Shylock. He says, I stand for judgment. Answer, will I have it? Well, will the American people ever have it?
Nope.
When you were doing the comedy, and then you got Salieri, and suddenly you become
excuse me.
Yeah.
I was doing the Amadeus and Scarface at the same time.
Wow.
I was flying from Hollywood to Prague.
Wow. How'd you keep your head together with that?
Because they're so different.
Yeah.
If they were subtly like close, it would have been difficult. But this was like one was a vacation from the other.
Wow.
But my point in saying it is that they were both released pretty close
Yes.
at the same
Right.
time. But no one remembers that it was that close. They remember, oh yeah, you did Scarface, but they always remember Salieri.
How did you get that part?
Just luck, good fortune. I think every actor in the world wanted that part.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was the hottest play in the world at that
Big,
time.
I mean, the greatest stars. You could bankroll a film on their names and reputations. Fortunately for me, Milos had something else in mind. Thank God.
And it was you.
It turns out it was me and Tom Hulse.
Did he have you in mind for it originally, or did he have you in mind when you went to audition for him?
We'll never know. I saw him a couple of times, and then suddenly they say he wants you to read, so I went to see him. I don't know if he knew exactly what he had in mind until he just came across the actor he seemed to have fit. That's a lot of courage, because that was bankrolled by one producer, all his own money.
Really?
Yeah, but he had that same producer success with Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes.
Right. Who was that producer?
Zantz.
That's right.
And that took a lot of balls.
Did you read a lot? Did you read a lot for Milos though? Did he put you through a lot of auditions? No, just
once.
Once.
Yeah.
And
one audition.
We taped it once.
So you did it once for him, and did he give you the job on the spot, or was sort of no?
Did you remember where you were when you heard you'd gotten the lead in this gigantic?
I was painting my kitchen.
Really?
In Brooklyn, yeah.
And they called you?
Yeah, and I still didn't believe it. I didn't. It was written by a Brit
Peter
for a
Shaffer,
Brit,
yeah.
you know, who's a friend now.
Yeah, wonderful man.
And he is, isn't he? He's
Yeah.
a great conversationalist.
I love Peter. Yeah. But it was just saying, written by a Brit for a Brit, and you thought there's no way I'm going to get this part. That's going to change my life.
No, it's like they were going through the motions for some reason. You know, they had to see some American actors, you know, and I was nobody. You know, and they called, and I said, yeah, well, okay, you want me. I want you. And I said, okay, what's next? He says, well, now we have to talk to the writer. And I said, well, it's fine, thank you. I've got to finish painting my kitchen. I've been asked to consider Scarface, and you know, Al was partly responsible for me getting Scarface, by the way, Al Pacino.
Mm-hmm.
He and Brian. I mean, they
Brian
were
De
working.
Palma, right?
Yeah, they had to agree.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the audition. They said, look, we want you for this, but we kept saying, can you hold off because Amadeus may be in the... So they said, okay, we're going to give you till such and such a date, but then we have to have an answer. And I needed the money. I got a family and little kids, you know. And they wouldn't come up with it with Amadeus. So I said, okay, I'll do Scarface. I mean, of course I would be glad to. It's a good movie. Yeah. And then I went to LA and we're working on Scarface, and they called me when I was on the set. You got the part. It's just like Hollywood. You got the part. Bells are ringing. Yeah. You got the part. I said, and that's when I got scared. Because I was really a crusader for American actors. Right. I still am.
Right.
American actors are as good as anyone in the world. Anyone. I guess you can sense my pride.
Yeah.
But I said, okay, now you got to prove it. Now you got to deliver, baby.
You got to show those British actors that you're as good as they are in this part.
Even now, I get goose pimples when I think of, I swear, I get goose pimples. Because I was really scared. I said, you better be good. And I went home and I started to work while I was working on Scarface.
Because it was Paul Scofield who played Salieri originally.
It
The
sure
great
was.
Paul Scofield.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that performance?
No. He never came to America with it. He didn't want to come.
You know, it's funny you say that because I remember talking to Peter Shaffer about that when he died. I said, Peter, how come he didn't come with it Broadway? And he said, well, I went to him and I said, please, Paul, we would love you to come to Broadway. And he said, Peter, it's the time of year when my wife and I go to our house in Scotland and we paint our shutters.
You see.
And that was it.
You see.
That was it. So he was going off to paint when he turned down the role, and you were painting your kitchen when you were offered the role. Amazing. All right, listen, it's been great talking to you. F. Murray Abraham, one of our terrific actors. And you can see F. Murray Abraham in The Merchant of Venice. He's playing Shylock. It is
scary Shylock.
A scary Shylock at Pace University's Schimmel Center for the Arts. And you're going to tour with this Merchant of Venice, yes?
Yes. And I really urge anyone who thinks of themselves as a serious theater goer to come and compare this production with Al Pacino's production. It's a rare opportunity to see two Academy Award winners do the same great role.
And you're going to be in Chicago with it, you said?
Chicago and Boston and in Santa Monica, theater that Dustin Hoffman built.
Who did a Shylock too, if I'm not mistaken, on
Yes,
Broadway
he
many
did.
years ago. Interesting. F. Murray Abraham, thank you very much for being our guest
Thanks a
tonight on
lot.
Theater Talk. Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.
This week on Theater Talk,
I was busy with 2 other shows, actually 3 other shows. I had to drop out of one show, writing shows. And I said, but here's the opportunity. Life is only as exciting as if you say yes.
Yeah.
If you say no, it doesn't get better, it doesn't change. And I went in.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskett.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And there is a fantastic new version of La Cage aux Folles. Well, it seems like it's a new version because it has the most wonderful replacement actor, tonight's guest, Michael.
He was born to play the role because he wrote the role. We've been waiting for years to see Harvey Fierstein as Albin in La Cage aux Folles, and here he is now on Broadway, turning this wonderful, wonderful revival into something I actually think even more touching, more moving, and richer. Your performance is really brilliant, Harvey.
Well, first of all, did you see my bio?
No.
My bio says, and do be, like list my credits, and it says, and do be careful what you do in your youth. It will come back to bite you.
Now, how did this come about? I mean, I would imagine that over the years, people have suggested you're the obvious person to play
Never.
Albin.
It's one of those funny things. Nobody's ever said, why don't you play Albin? I was 28 years old when the show opened. Obviously way too young to play it. And then over the years, nobody's ever said you should play Albin. I mean, they thought of Tevye before Albin. And I never thought of it because I really do think I see the show more from Georges' point of view than Albin's. I think of Albin as being, a funny character, but a little slight and more of a almost. In some ways, he's the object you have to move around to tell the story. When you write when you write it all, you're putting all the pieces together. And I never saw the show just from his point of view. While I did see it from the son's point of view, I saw it from Georges' point of view writing it. And anyway, when this came up, when Barry and Babani called me and said,
Barry Weissler and David Babani.
yeah, they basically said, no one wants to follow Doug Hodge. Doug
who won a Tony as Albin
and
last
was
year.
so brilliant. I mean, it's a performance he did in London. He moved it to the West End and then came to Broadway, took all the awards on Broadway, and it's a performance that took the show from where it had been left in 2006, where it was sort of like, well, that was cute back in the 80s, but that show's dead.
An unsuccessful revival on Broadway a few years
And
ago.
brought it back to life, where everybody said, this is a viable, this show is fabulous, viable. The message is just as new now as it ever was. And, and it was his performance with Kelsey's performance, those 2 performances that did that to the show. No one wanted to follow that. It was the same thing when I took over Torch Song in London. Nobody wanted to follow Anthony Sher. Anthony Sher won all the awards for doing Torch Song in London, and no other actor wanted to follow him. And the producer said, well, if you do it, then somebody else will do it afterwards.
It's a new thing. If you can't get a replacement, just get the writer. He'll do it.
Just get Fierstein, yeah. We can't get an actor, just get that guy. So anyway, they called me and they said, you really are the most viable person. I said, I never thought of doing it, but once again, if you don't do it now, then will you ever? And will you always say to yourself that thing that Jack O'Brien said to me about Tevye? Either you do it or you spend the rest of your life saying, they offered it to me and I didn't do it. And people go, yeah, right. So I said, it's one of those opportunities. I was busy with 2 other shows, actually 3 other shows. I had to drop out of one show, writing shows. And I said, but here's the opportunity. Life is only as exciting as if you say yes.
Yeah.
If you say no, it doesn't get better, it doesn't change. And I went in and it's been, what a learning experience.
Why?
So strange. Well, first of all, to try and see the show just from Alban's point of view.
Not as the writer who's
Not
created
as
the
the
whole.
writer,
Yeah.
but look at it just from Alban's point of view. And finding the through line of these 3 personalities, because you've got Zaza, the cabaret performer who's bigger than life and all that.
And Alban, we should say, is the drag queen who plays Zaza.
And Alban, yes. And then, I mean, it's one character, but it's the many sides. And then you have Alban, who's a middle-aged, sort of chubby guy who thinks that his husband could be cheating on him and is a little insecure and hides behind Zaza. Zaza is the thing. And then you have this person that emerges by the end, this fully formed person, that emerges as mother of all things.
Yes.
Who is all of the heart of Alban, all of the guts of Zaza, come together through this thing. And that was the line I was able to find as an actor.
Now, Susan and I both had a thought when we were watching you play the part, especially when you did I Am What I Am. I mean, the great big end of the first act, after Alban has been denied by his family and is angry. And we both thought, this is Harvey kind of reaching back to Torch Song Trilogy. There were shades of what you were doing in Torch Song Trilogy in this now. That
Well,
anger,
they were written close together. I was performing Torch Song off Broadway when I was writing this, when I was writing La Cage, and in fact, Mascara, Alban's opening number, really is Jerry's musicalizing of the opening scene of Torch Song.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
And when Jerry and I started writing the show, he said, "This is what I've written. He said it's about you getting dressed in Torch Song." He said, but it's the same moment in La Cage. I want to do this in La Cage. And we wrote that scene first before Arthur ever came on board.
Arthur Lawrence, who directed it originally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, not if you read Peter Felicia's book. The man needs to get a fact. Get a fact, Peter. Get a fact. But Jerry and I wrote that scene first with that, and that really was almost out of Torch Song. Now, the way we worked and the reason it would look like my writing and the reason that there's a line that's very blurred between Jerry and I, which I'm very pleased. It's no one's business really who wrote what, or I always talk about in Torch Song, 1/3 of the reviews credited the second act being all in a bed to the director, 1/3 to the set designer, and 1/3 to the writer. And it's nobody's business to know, but of course it was the writer. But theater should become that collective mind. So what I would do is the 3 of us would meet at Jerry's house.
You, Jerry Herman, Arthur Lawrence.
And Arthur, once we really started into it. And I would read the scene of that week that I had just written. We would then discuss the scene and what could be musicalized in it or where it needed to move and where it was going next and sort of think about the next scene. And then my work was sort of done for the day. Then we would read the last week's scene and slip the song that Jerry had written that week into it. So that's how we wrote it. We wrote the show in 3 months. I mean, it was just one of those, I never really rewrote. I mean, we cut, but we never really rewrote. And so I Am What I Am was first a monologue. It was first, I wrote the whole scene, and I wrote this thing of him standing up there saying, I'm 50 years old, and my entire life I have been told I'm wrong, but I am not wrong. This is who I am. I'm sorry that you all think I should be someone else, but this is who I am, and all that. And, and it became I Am What I Am. So when I would perform I Am What I Am, like in a club act or whatever, I had a certain message to performing it. Then performing it in context of the show, it became a totally other thing. And I mean, I was trying to describe it to Jerry on the phone. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it. But you get to that point in the show. Alban is despite the fact that he's, insecure or whatever, he is essentially a happy person who has created this whole world, and he loves his drag queens around him, and he loves everything.
And he's the star of the Saint-Tropez.
Show, and he's just having the great time, and someone rips the joy out of him.
And it's his son. I mean,
And it's
his
his son.
adopted son.
Who says, I don't want you to meet my fiancée and her parents.
You have to go away.
You have to go away. And it just rips the joy. And no one has the right to do that to another person. You don't have the right to take away someone's joy. Michael Riedel.
Remember that, Michael Riedel.
Thank you very much.
But it's his mantra. Where is there joy for me to rip out? He is the Grinch of Broadway.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you that.
But personally, but when you're behind a door, so beautifully staged, you're behind a door when they tell you you have to go away, we don't want you here. And when you came out of that door, that's where I was so reminded of Arnold. The look on your face of just being crushed, fighting for your identity, having established your identity, and
then you have to stand. And then you have to stand there singing with the other drag queens, and then it's like no, and then you let it, and then it's actually you just let it bubble up.
And
but you have to do as an actor though. You have these. What kids think. Well, so how do I cry on stage? All this. It's like, don't. That ain't your job. The job is for them to cry. Right? It's let it all bubble. Just let it bubble up. Let it take over. Trust the music. Trust the material, and it's all there. And it's really very cathartic to sing that every night.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
There's a guy that the house manager stands out in the lobby because after you finish I Am What I Am, you storm down the aisle.
That's right. You run out.
And I found out they stand in the lobby and write down what I say when I come through the lobby every night.
What do you say?
I don't know. I say something outrageous. So it's like, get me a cab. I'm out of here.
It's in the stage manager.
When I hit the street, I usually say the same thing because there's always like people walking down the block, and there I am in this black and gold gown, no wig, right, with the earrings and all that, tears straining down my face, and I go, too much for night. Too early in the day.
I wanted to ask you something you said about writing with Jerry. Did you intentionally write scenes that you knew he would turn into songs? Or does it bother you if you write a really good scene and suddenly that scene is going to become a Jerry Herman song?
Both ways. Both ways. You write it knowing, and you write it and wonder why. Like open my best stuff, but it all has to serve the story, and it has to serve the musical, and it is a musical, and the book should lead you always to a song. If the book stands out too much, you are in a little bit of trouble.
Now, that original production of La Cage, which Arthur directed, was done very much in the old-fashioned Jerry Herman, hello, Dolly, Mame, big, big style.
Even the poster was
same artist.
Exactly,
yes.
Same artist who did Mame.
And it's Mame, like Mame's right shoulder on that poster, and Alban's left shoulder on that one. Were you happy with that very glitzy Broadway version of La Cage originally? Was that the right way to go?
I come from La Mama. I come from La Mama, where if somebody needed to have something, I went home and made it. Right. If you had a poster, I made it. If you needed a dress, you made it. If you need, I come from La Mama, where we did our own lights, we wrote our own shows, we made our own music. I come from and Tordsong had moved from off Broadway to Broadway. Not in an easy way. I mean, I was still personally crocheting the bunny slippers for Tordsong. So to have these giant sets and costumes and all that, being thrown at something I'd written, it was fabulous.
Wow.
Was it my ideal? No, but I was 28 years old. I had Jerry Herman and Arthur Lawrence. And Arthur wasn't particularly nice to me a lot of the time.
Why?
A lot of time he was, because he's Arthur.
Yeah. Was he on top of you the book? Because he wrote, Gypsy, arguably the greatest book of all time. Was he fiddling around with your book?
Sure. But we wrote it. I mean, like I said, we wrote it together. We all did this together. It was, and that didn't bother me much. He can be gruff. He just had Arthur has his way, and I love him.
But you must have learned a
lot. I was just about to say, and I owe a debt of gratitude to that man. I mean, he literally taught me. I mean, I'd written musicals at La Mama and all that, but the man taught me structure and sense and how to go from one scene to the other and how to build a song. Because if a song doesn't land in a musical, it's usually the book's fault, you know. And he showed me all of that, you know.
How to set up the song.
Yeah, how to set up a song, how to set up a character. You don't have a lot of time to set up characters. And, you know, just handing him a scene and watching him edit it down was an education that you can't get at any college, you know. I mean, so I owe him, you know, as much fun as I like to have at Arthur's behalf, I owe him a ton of gratitude. And I love him. I mean, we are families.
Now, that first production, though, I remember Jerry Herman telling me, we went out of town to Boston, and Jerry said, I think he said he sat with you and Arthur.
We sat three. We sat on the aisle, usually Jerry, Arthur, Jerry, me in the middle, and Arthur behind me.
Right, and it's 1983.
1983.
You're in Boston. You're about to premiere a musical about two openly gay men who are lovers. Right. Never before shown, I think, in
you know, we like to tell that story that way a lot. You know, that something like this had never been seen before. But please remember, the week before, I won the Tony Award for getting, how do you say this on PBS? For 6 minutes, I was being up the bum center stage, you know. I mean, I had backroom sex in Torch Song for 6 minutes, standing there having somebody, you know.
And you got a Tony Award for it.
And I got a Tony Award for it. So it wasn't quite as innocent a time as we like to paint it.
The way Jerry tells it, you all sort of held hands and you thought, are they going to stone us when this musical goes up?
Yeah,
was there that sense?
No, what there was there was sort of that sense, but that was coming out of the two of them so much, and out of our producers, and out of Alan Carr, you know, who had actually put away his moo-moo for this. He was wearing men's clothes. Maybe my Alban is a tribute to Alan Carr. But we were doing something that had never been done before in a musical, because a musical's not a play. You know? The Helen Hayes Theater is, you know, 600 seats. This is 3,000 seats.
The Palace. Yeah.
The Colonial. The Colonial there. And you had this audience, this Boston audience, who's a, you know, Catholic white audience, and we didn't know what the reaction would be. And it was unbelievably thrilling. It was unbelievably thrilling. The story I like to tell it that to me says it all was I had been tossed out by my landlord out of my apartment. I had to find another place, and I was, you know, ending Torch Song and trying to do Lacage and all that. So I had this place. My friend Judy was decorating it for me. So when I got back from Boston, it would all be done. And she ordered a big mirror for the bathroom. And my brother, who was overseeing my money and all that, said, "What is this money for this mirror? He was gonna. What do you think he's made out of money?" And blah 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 blah. And then my brother came that night. My brother came to Boston for the first preview and called her from the hotel room and said, "Put diamond studs on it."
Now, the other story I want you to tell, because you've told me the story and I love it. Gene Barry and George Hearn, the original, Georges Alban. And the first, was it the first preview where curtain goes up?
It was the...
Where Gene Barry forgot the lyrics.
Yeah, no, it was in the middle of previews.
Yeah,
but it's we all go blank on stage. I call it the white room. All of a sudden you've stepped into a white room. There's nothing on the walls to tell you where you are. There's no one else there. There's not a clue. You have no idea where you are, and it's like that's the actor's nightmare. So it does happen. And Gene was not the youngest gentleman in the room. And they're sitting at the cafe table, and do you recall that windy little beach we walked along that afternoon in fall, the afternoon we met, a pillow with a concertina sang, what was the song? Strange what we recall, odd what we forget, he sang. And George leaned over the table, took his hand and said, la, da da da, da da da, da da da, da. Da-da.
You and Jerry must have died.
Well, poor Jerry. You know, Jerry doesn't have a sense of humor about that stuff.
No.
I, on the other hand.
Now, speaking of Jerry,
it's like Robert Goulet, you know, bless his soul, when he took over that last, and he had trained himself over the years to, whenever he went blank, just say something, you know, and the things that would come out of that man's mouth. But one of my favorites was, here's a line, "You traitor, you Judas," and the line came out, "You traitor, you Buddhist."
Now, did you have to audition for Jerry? Because I know Jerry's very particular about how his score is sung. Have you sung for Jerry? You have not.
As it was a famous story, of course, before I did Fiddler, Jerry Bach and Sheldon Harnick and Joe Stein, I insisted they hear me sing the entire score first, and that was that. Jerry has seen me do Hairspray and Tort Song and Fiddler and Catered Affair. Jerry knows what my voice sounds like. When they asked me to do it, I said, I'm going to ask Jerry because I'm not doing it unless I have Jerry's full approval. And David Babani said to me, let me ask him. And I said, you know what? It's probably better because I don't want him saying no. I don't want to feel him saying no to me.
Right.
And I said, but unless he's really behind it, there's no way I'm doing it. We've had this child together for 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a marriage when you write a show together, and Jerry and I, for 30 years, have made every decision on every the show's done all over the world, and we've made every decision together. Whenever we do something, we call each other. We go in as a married couple, as a front together.
Yeah.
This is our child, and we take care of our child. So I didn't want him to have to say no to me. I said, you tell him that Harvey doesn't even know we're going to ask him. And Jerry said, I'm giving you the frank answer. He said, as a composer, oi. As a businessman, you have my blessing. But there's a happy ending to the story, which is Jerry, of course, has lots of friends. He's in L.A.
Yeah.
And Jerry has lots of friends, and he's had them at every performance. And I get email after email and phone call after phone call crying with him crying, saying, Harvey, I hear your performance is a triumph. I hear it's this and there. He said, I am so happy for you. I'm happy for us. I'm happy for the show. He said, to me, it sounds like a whole new life for the show on top of the new life it just got. And so he's thrilled.
That score is so wonderful, though. I've heard it a million times in my life. And sitting there the other day when I watched you do it, I just thought my toes were tapping. Yeah. I was happy. I was moved.
Well, I had written to him when he said yes. I wrote him a note just saying, I cannot promise to sing pretty, but I can promise they will hear every lyric. And his first note back to me was, I just got a call saying they've never heard the lyrics so clearly.
And even though it wasn't written for your type of voice, you reinvent it for yourself and make the number powerful.
Well, Alban, once again, Alban's not the singing role in the show. No. Alban has 4 songs. Mascara, about getting in drag, which you can have a lot of fun with. I mean, I do Boom It and all that, but I also reinvented that with the director of putting the dress on and the breast. Because Doug didn't put on the breasts and all that stuff. I said, I want them to see the rubber breasts. I want them to see the dress. I want them to see. I don't want magic.
Right.
Like with George, it almost slipped on without you seeing. I said, I want them to see how much pain there is in being a girl.
Right.
And a transvestite that I've been writing to about another project, I wrote to her, a transsexual rather, in Australia. I wrote to her the other day saying, oh, it's so hard being a girl. And she wrote back, she said, but not if you really want it. So that song is that. Then La Cage is Zaza's world, you know, and that in this production, the way that Terry directed this production, brilliantly the way he directed, you got all this latitude, and I'm able to do my tribute to Charles Pierce. You know, I love Charles Pierce, the female impersonator, and I put him in the movie of Tort Song so that people would see him on film. But that's his Marlena. Hello, I'd like to sing a song for you now. A song I sang in Berlin, I sang it in Paris, I sang it in Sicily, I sang it to make me stop. That's Charles Pierce. So I put that in, or I do Carol Channing and Betty Davis, and then these other rude lines that have just come to me from God knows where.
And I guess since you're the writer, you've got license to
a little license.
Change it at any time.
A little license. Well, there's some lines that I put in that frankly Arthur cut out. You know, I put a couple of lines back in, like when they asked me to sing in Best of Times, and she says in G, and I say G flat. I've had a child.
Arthur cut that out originally?
Yeah, and the line that I put in instead, then I would give him, sometimes I would write him 3 jokes for each place, and then he would pick which one he liked, and the one that he liked was G flat. It's been a long day.
Not as good as that.
It's not as good as I've had a child.
Why would he cut something like that out? Just, we've got to wrap it up. But one thing I did notice that's different from this Lacage and the original production, I'd gone back and looked at some of the interviews with Gene Barry and George Hearn, and in every interview they made sure to point out that they were married, that they were straight men. There seemed to be this publicity campaign to say, we're playing gay people, but we're not gay.
And, well, but I mean, even gay people did it back then. Remember female impersonators like Craig Russell and Jim Bailey. Jim Bailey would appear like on the Sonny and Cher show, and he'd wear a tuxedo and carry a cigar.
And talk about dating.
And then he'd come out as Barbara Streisand or Peggy Lee. It's like, what kind of self-loathing? But those were the days. I mean, you know, they can say whatever they like, but Arthur and Jerry brought women as dates to the opening night of Lacage.
Really? Did you?
No.
Who was your date at the opening night?
My mother. No. No, the guy I was dating at the time, I thanked him on the Tonys.
That's right, yeah.
He was a word processor.
Oh, yeah. So, anyway, listen, Harvey, it's a great, terrific performance as Alba.
Are you going to behave yourself at all before we leave? Can Susan and I beat some sense
We
into
really,
you?
if only it would work.
How can we beat? You gave me a lovely lineup. What are you doing to that poor innocent show? Whatever happened to the days where producers like Merrick or Barnum would say, I'm spending billions of dollars to bring you the finest in entertainment, and we'd all go, ooh. They say we're spending $65 million to bring you a show, and you go, ooh.
Well, I'll tell you why. You know why? Because when David Merrick said, I'm spending billions of dollars to bring you a show, it was Hello, Dolly. When they say it, it's Spider-Man. That's the difference.
You didn't give it a chance to become
That's
what
right.
it's been. It's still in the egg. It's still hatching. I can feel that Spidey's coming.
It's an ostrich egg. And
I bought a Spider-Man shirt at Halloween to wear to opening night.
Are you going to go to the opening night of Spider-Man?
I'm still alive.
Of course.
I should live so long. That's the line. Rewrite. I should live so long.
And when Reeve Carney leaves Spider-Man, Harvey Fierstein is the replacement Spider-Man. Because I know Bono and the Edge want to hear you sing their songs.
All right, next season, Newsies and Kinky Boots.
Your new shows, exactly right. Harvey, it's great to see you, and best of luck in La Cage aux Folles.
And I hope you live through this season.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.
This week on Theater Talk.
You're at a point in your life now where you have really become a kind of, an iconic New York figure.
What's iconic?
Well, you're a real New York.
What is iconic? Let's all level. Let's all level today and tell each other what iconic means.
You are like as
it's a mouthwash.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And tonight we have my favorite actress.
My favorite actress, everybody's favorite actress, Elaine Stritch, making her 5th appearance on Theater Talk. Thank you for coming back and joining us.
Must be doing something right.
You are welcome anytime on Theater Talk.
It's a very relaxing show, and I thank you for asking me. Now, all the proper is out of the way.
Now let's get down to brass tacks.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
You have just opened in A Little Night Music. You've got terrific reviews playing Madame Armfelt. That show was going to close, and you and Bernadette Peters have gone in and turned it into the biggest hit in town.
Isn't that terrific?
Yeah.
God, good news.
You know, you've been
once in a while. You know,
You've been a box office draw your entire life, have you not?
I think I'm settled enough to say that there's a reason why audiences like me. I really think that I level with them. I don't think there's any. If I wanted, no, I just think I do. I never have lied to an audience. I specify that because I've done plenty of that off. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Still fool, but I'll tell you, I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare. They're just collectively terrific people. Mm-hmm. When everybody gets in the theater together and they've got their blinders on, and I mean that seriously, you know, people watch the theater like this. They don't, you know, in a movie you can I don't think there's much commenting, or they get killed in the theater if they make a noise. So. But I get their attention and I hold their attention. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that would stop me from winning them over is bad material. Mm-hmm. And that's happened sometimes. But when that happens, I supply my own.
Right. You're very good at that, though, aren't you? I mean, when
Yes,
you've been in the loser plays, you know how to at least put over what you're doing.
Yes, let me tell you, this is fun story. Sunday night at the theater, at the Walter Kerr Theater, a little night music, 8 times a week is on. So now 2 key players are leaving. One was the big leading man,
Alexander Hansen, right?
Absolutely.
Wonderful performance.
Who is knockout. He's one of the best leading men I've ever seen in the musical theater. Brilliant. Now, he's being replaced, and someone who was in the choral, a young girl who was just adorable. Her name is Betsy Morgan. And I get out, I'm all teary-eyed because the 2 people are leaving, and I'm really sincerely kind of tearing up. So I said, and this wonderful girl who's been in the show, Betsy Johnson is what I call her, right? So thinking about ad-libbing comes easily to me. So I said, well, I went down on my knees, I apologized to everybody, and said that with all the tears, so much for all my emotion, it's all phony now because I got her name wrong. But anyway, I introduced her, and at the end of the introduction, I said, and she can't design And that got me back. It got him back. You have to bleep that when you do it?
No, you would get a dispensation.
Okay.
But that's something that you've always been so skilled at. I mean, I often think, because I know how funny you are, you know, I've spent some time with you at dinner and all that, and you know, you're very witty, very clever, sharp woman.
I didn't lick it off the ground. My mother and father both individualistically were on their own. Very, very, they were not in the theater, had anything to do with it. But boy.
So it was in the family. So that kind of repartee that you're so good at was just when you were growing up around the house.
We all had it, so it was difficult growing up.
Was it kind of sharp repartee aimed at each other sometimes?
Sometimes, sure.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in the family?
Oh, no, not that kind of ad-libbing. Are you kidding?
She wouldn't have survived. Hey, you know, we had Charles Bush here earlier today, and he had seen your performance, and he said to me he thought it was very Brechtian, and that you were in it and outside of it. That you go every moment, that you have truth in every moment, and you went inside and you went outside. And then he told me that you'd had this very sort of avant-garde early training, and he wondered if you weren't going back to that to reference it.
I have no idea. If it showed in my work, as the saying goes, then I think it probably did have something to do with what I learned in dramatic school, and the fact that I was very elegantly prepared for the American theater. I mean, I had, you know, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms in my, you know.
You had all the high cultural stuff to learn.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I did Chekhov and who's the wonderful improviser?
Meisner? No.
No. Molière.
Oh, right.
You know, I had all that kind of training, and, you know, not just another pretty face, you know, and coward, and, you know, high-class stuff. I had a very elegant preparation to fight the things you have to fight in the American theater. And truth was #1 on my agenda. I really wanted to tell the truth because I don't think you can fool an audience for a minute.
But you're at a point in your life now where you have really become a kind of, you know, an iconic New York figure. You're a
What's
real,
iconic
Well, you're a real New York.
What is iconic? Let's all level. Let's all level today and tell each other what iconic means.
You are like as
it's a mouthwash.
You are as much a part now of the New York landscape as the Statue of Liberty,
Absolutely.
the Empire State Building, Macy's. I mean, people go to stay in the Carlisle where you live just because they hope to get a glimpse of you parading,
flying through the through the lobby.
Do you have now an issue when you're playing a part that the Elaine Stritch character that we know, does that come out in your acting now? The part that you see.
I think it always did.
It always did.
You can't lose Elaine Stritch in your performance. No actress loses herself completely unless she's insane. Because part of the reason, a lot of the reason that you've been chosen is because of Elaine. It's not, I mean, if you haven't got that personality through any direction, good or bad direction, you got to come through. It's how you behave as so-and-so. It's how Elaine behaves. You know, there's not that much makeup in the world. And certainly none today, in case you haven't noticed. Because, I'll explain that to you as well. The only thing that I am against the American theater about, now that's a lie already, but it doesn't matter. I really mean it's one of the few things that is the fact that we do 8 shows a week. The fact that we do 8 shows a week stops me from giving hello to someone my full attention. You know, I'm turning into a phony. I can't talk. Right. Or,
I can't go out.
Because that's the least of my worries, but I just really mean that it's so time consuming. That's all you do. And I will not do less. I will not look at a producer if they want to give me that privilege. No matinee. No.
You do the matinees.
If my name is above the title, I'm there.
The first time you came on the show, I remember you told us that Ethel Merman had said to you.
And I'll tell you.
We do.
The wonderful quote of Merman's is so true. You want to do a musical comedy, and you want to do it right, you got to live like a nun. It's true. It's true. But that insinuation of the nun, meaning you're a pure, that's not what I'm talking about, because I'm a few years older now. Ethel. So the point is, Michael and Susan, this is robbing you of enough sleep sometimes to perform at your best. It's just a physical fact that you have to have 8 hours, excuse me, to do a show properly.
But you know, you're at a point in your life, and I admire this with Angela Lansbury as well.
I should say.
The two of you could continue to do 30 Rock and do all these TV appearances that people love you on. You don't have to do a Broadway show. You don't have to put yourself through the ringer of 8 performances.
I love acting on the stage.
More than anything else?
Well, it's very difficult to talk like that anymore. When you walk out and take a curtain call in the American theater and they like you, my God. And let me get this in before our time goes completely away. I have got a jewel working with me in Bernadette Peters. I've always thought she would be the Desiree of all time in A Little Night Music, and she is.
Hal Prince went to see the show the other night. He directed
last night.
He directed Night Music the first time around.
Yes, and I had forgotten that.
Yeah.
And it all came back to me last night when I saw his face. And he was saying,
but he went backstage to talk to you. What did he say to you? Did he give you any?
He said I was wonderful, but I heard him say to Bernadette Peters she was brilliant, so the hell with him. I don't care if he directed it or not. No, wonderful is not enough for me, so I want Hal to know that. I'll get him to watch this show.
Well, I was backstage with you once when Elaine May and Stanley Donen came back.
Oh yes.
Where they were
well,
adorable.
and it was a particularly good show.
Yes, it was.
That night.
Yeah.
And
but I saw you
asking. Elaine said to me, "You landed all the pauses."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's pretty sophisticated dialogue.
Did you work with Trevor Nunn to prepare this performance, or how did you?
Trevor Nunn, who's directed this production.
I had a day.
Oh.
A day. Trevor was wonderful with me, and he gave me all that he could with the time that he had and that I had.
Right.
Well, did you?
Is it fair? Is it fair though? I mean, for a person to go into a show with only one day with the big director there?
No, it isn't fair. Well, what's fair? Have you ever noticed? Come on.
So you're kind of on your own.
No, I went on in a Little Night Music after like 2 weeks, maybe a little less rehearsal, and doing some performances out in.
Yeah.
But my life, I hit the street and it all starts to happen. It's something about me. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's just my attitude to it. I have the fullest life of anyone I know. It doesn't mean it's happy. It doesn't mean it's sad. It's just chock-a-block. I'm doing something every minute. It's just incredible. And I'm beginning to think that it's the answer to longevity. I really do think it is. A lot of people think that, don't they, Susan?
I would think it is.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can't
would you
imagine
turn off your beeper?
Yeah, it's fine.
Would you turn it off?
It's off. It's off. You.
It's their first fight. Where's the camera?
Well, we've been going through it today, but it's not off if it's beeping.
No, it isn't, Michael. It's ruining the show. Michael, where's the camera?
There's the camera. Put the camera on Elaine, please.
So
at all times. No, I'm very unconscious of it, so I don't know where it is.
All right, here we
No,
go.
it's all right. The follow apology.
And there is no best side in this kerchief outfit I've got on.
They're all wonderful sides,
All right,
every
Susan.
part.
So essentially, what you're saying, you will work for the rest of your life. I mean, you will always work. There's no
I'm not
retirement
so
for Elaine
sure.
Stritch.
I'm not so sure. Let me give you an example of how I feel about that. I don't want to do 8 shows a week.
This
all
may be the
year.
last time?
No, I don't think it's the last time, but I think it's very few. I would, maybe in another year. It depends on what comes up, It's as good as the material. But the other day, what's that wonderful writer's name that writes about all the little animals, the dialogue?
David Sedaris.
No, God, Susan, you are a love. Anyway, a book
Speak for
came
yourself.
out yesterday of his stuff that I recorded.
Oh, yeah.
And I really, playing a toothless bear is it's time for me. It's time for me to do that. And there's a wonderful thing about the toothless bear and a raccoon getting their hair done together. And I just am telling you, it's the best. It's the best. And no makeup. No hair, you just record, and you can just have cappuccinos all over them.
You have a big future in books on tape, Elaine.
Well, this is what I did. This is what came out yesterday. So we'll see.
So what's the biggest wipeout of doing a Little Night Music or
you're in the
another?
wheelchair.
you're in a wheelchair.
Getting ready.
Yeah, you're in the wheelchair.
So you have to, well, that helps. But, and I'm so phony. I get, when the lights come up when I'm in the wheelchair, I go, yay! And I get up and I'm walking abnormally fast. I am running around the theater and telling them that I'm still, I can take walking parts.
Your curtain call is fantastic.
I know.
I jump up.
Kill myself.
You do. I'm not crippled.
Boom. Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Light the candle.
That's right.
Now, has Steve Sondheim, he's come to see the show. What has Steve said? Does Steve give you any direction? at all?
Steve gave me 2 of the best pieces of direction that I've ever had in my life to sing Liaison. Liaison! What's happened to them? Which, is a tough song. Oh boy, it's a tough song. Hal said there's something you should know about that number whenever you feel a little off. You're great and you're terrific. And remember this, when you get depressed in any way about that song, there was a woman overheard by Steve one night coming out of the theater. Said, well, my favorite song was Liaisons. No, not Liaisons. It wasn't that good. It was my favorite song is The Azores. I think I'm so tempted tonight to do the Azores. What's happened to them? What's happened to the Azores? Isn't it great? It would knock those things. Oh, wait a minute. Can I have your program? I don't know who this is or who wrote this. I love it though, don't you?
What did Steve say? What were the direction that Steve gave you? Said Steve told you two important things
at
about
the end of the song, and I said, "Oh, Steve, don't ask me to. I'm not asking you to do it. I'm not asking you, and I'm just saying that you could try it if you want to. If you don't, throw it out." And I thought, what the hell is it? Snore. She suddenly falls asleep. So I thought, when I got back to the theater, I thought, my God, that's terrific. And I saw where he's got a sense of the theater and his lyrics and so many, he's so smart, I could kill him. He knows so much that it's, you know.
So
but I'm not afraid of him anymore. I'm angsty, you know, oh God, Steve's out front. But I'm not fearful.
So you've added the little snore now at the end?
So at the end I say, oh, and he also told me when I'm saying, it's what's to recollect if not to blah, 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 blah. And she's going to sing liaisons, as she does many times in the song. But this is her last bit in the song. And he said, hold that note. Ugly, we don't care what it sounds like. She's hanging on.
Yeah.
And she says, Liaise. And then she's an old lady, so she gets kind of tired in the wheelchair. And then she goes.
And you get.
And she goes out like that, and I know what that's like because I've left my 70s, is the way I put it. All right? So I know what that's like. You can fall asleep like, because you're so tired. You've been around for 85 years, for God's sake.
And it's the 8th performance of the week.
And it depends on how big the snore is, depends on what day it is. You understand what I'm saying?
Now, let me ask you.
A
number of actresses of a certain age have been very open. Angela was, and Marion Seldes has been.
She's terrific, incidentally.
Yes, but about using.
No, I want to say that.
Yeah.
This broad was so terrific to me before I opened this. You know what she said to me? Don't let them mess with you. You know, she's so straightforward, this Angela.
Who's the they? Don't let them.
It's time for me to know and you to find out. But if anybody tells me that, we know, actresses and actors know what that means. It means if they're messing with your personality and you've got a little of you in the part, leave it there and don't let anybody take your, and yet you can play a part.
Yeah.
And take them away on an escape and believe that this woman is in a wheelchair and she's funny.
Yeah.
And you do that like Elaine would do it. And Angela does it like Angela would do it. Don't let them mess with you, I think is the best piece of direction I ever got in my life. And it came from a peer of mine, who I think is a crackerjack broad.
Angela has used the earpiece at a certain age now when
I'll get out of the business.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because, you know, in the early previews, I know there were lyrics or lines which you don't tell me, I'll get it.
Yeah, and you know what? What's his name? Theater. The guy that's doing my favorite director, that's doing the show at Lincoln Center with all the actors in it.
Oh, Bart Scher.
No, who used to be
George Wolfe.
Yes, George
yes.
Wolfe. When I told him that they suggested I put something in my ear, he says, for God's sakes, it's her first week in preview. Would you give her a break? I wouldn't have one of those things.
You would not use that.
Never, 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 never. That's not why I got in the theater. I got in the theater to... And they say, oh, you don't... Trevor Nunn says to me, you'll never notice it. Oh, yeah? I wouldn't have some voice upstaging me in my ear. You think I'm out of my mind? You know, let him go up. I'm not going up when push comes to shove.
So there was pressure on you to use one of these buds?
Not pressure, but we will do whatever you want to do, Elaine. I said, well, then don't ever bring a mic near me. I'm in the theater to avoid mics. I don't even like this one. but it's the only way I can get over and talk to people on television. So that's okay. I don't.
You're a purist.
Yeah, I think I am actually in that department. You know, because I love the theater.
Yeah.
And never come late. That's why the lady is a tramp. Happy to admit to it. Happy to admit to it. I just love it. I love performing. And remember John Barrymore's great reading of the what was the name of the musical? It was 20th Century, when he looks at all his people at rehearsal and he said, "Children, I want you to know that I love the theater and all the charming people in it." Well, I mean, that says it all.
That's it.
Because there are more bastards in the American theater than you shake a stick at. But you got to go through them to get to where you are up on the stage with those people applauding your talent. My God. You wonder why you do 8 shows a week. So they've got us where the hairs are short, those producers. You know, and then when they say, well, take a day off, get out of here. Then you mess with yourself. You mess with what you think of yourself.
Take a day off, wear the earpiece.
Oh, yeah,
don't
wear
do
the
matinee.
earpiece, right. And take a longer pause. No, you don't tell me how long a pause to take. Not me. I know what, you get fighting with them.
Great.
Now I've learned to still fooling them. Now I go, you're right, you got it. How'd you know so much? Oh, isn't that wonderful? You're so good looking, too. You tell all this shit to everybody, and they keep saying, oh, she's really nice, And that's how you stay in the show. I mean, who takes direction?
You can't
Michael.
teach this stuff at acting school.
Well, I went to Stella Adler, so I know what I'm talking about. And sat next to Marlon Brando. You can't lose. You just can't lose. And had one date with him. That was enough for him. That was enough for him.
Elaine, it's always great to see you. You are absolutely brilliant, as always, as Madame Armfeldt in A Little Night Music at the Walter Kerr. I think you're there through November, but there's a lot of talk that you may keep doing those 8 shows a week for a little bit longer.
We're up for talking about the extension. And I think,
Hold out the cold, hard cash on the table.
The money, let me tell you quickly. When they talked to me about that, I said, well, come on. This is telling a big story on me, but never mind. I think we're going to extend. But I said, well, money came up, and I said, look, I'll take whatever Bernadette's making. I think we're in this together, and the audiences sees us as we call ourselves the Replacements. We're going to go do a club act called the Replacements. Anyway, so I said, I'll take whatever Bernadette's doing. And the guy says, oh, no, we can't do that. So what would you draw from that? I'm being big about it. I'll take what Bernadette takes. And they said, no, you won't. You'll take what you're taking. And I tell you, it was one of the saddest, funniest moments of my life. But that's the theater.
That's right.
So what are you going to do?
Whatever they're paying you, it isn't enough.
It isn't enough.
I'll tell you what you're going to do. You're going to do theater talk. That's what you're going to do. It cheers me up. I can get away with anything on this show.
8 times a week. All right.
Oh, my goodness.
Thanks so much for being our guest again.
You're very welcome.
We'll see
Thank
you at
you,
the Walter
Michael.
Kerr.
Thank you, Susan. And goodbye. Now, off to the races.
Thank you.
Or the Walter Kerr. Liaison. What's happened to them? Liaison. Disgraceful. What's become of them? Some of them hardly pay their shoddy way.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Loeb Foundation the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.